You're listening to the Pigskin Cafe, a podcast covering the wild world of college football. On tap for today are hot takes, controversy, and analysis on your favorite team. Here's your host, Hampton Sipper, in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back in to the Pigskin Cafe. My name is Hampton Sipper, and I've got Mr. Chase Haney and Graham Haney joining me today to talk a little college football playoff semifinal games. We're going to be previewing the matchups between Alabama and Michigan and Washington and Texas in less than a week now. We're 5 days away. Going to be two great games to really dive into, break down, and ultimately decide who will be playing in the College Football Playoff National Championship. But before we dive into that, I just want to say thank you for joining us today. We appreciate it very, very much. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Leave us a like on the video. Leave us a comment on who you think is going to be winning these two matchups, and hit that notification bell and follow us on social media. And that's all from me off the top. Chase, I'll kick it over to you to kind of get the conversation going.
Yeah, thanks, Hampton. I'll give you guys a little bit of a primer for where we want to start today. And we're in the midst of bowl season, and Capital One bowl season to be particular. Don't want to leave anything out.
Get it right.
Guys, I don't know about you, but I feel like each year I find myself watching less and less of these. And truly, it seems like I only watch them when I don't have anything else to do. But I find myself recently going to find something to do rather than watch some of these football games. And I think if we wanted to look at a very macro level of college football, then are you guys still with me? Okay, cool.
We weren't for a minute, but
yeah, I can see
we
it
are
from,
now.
Hope that the uploading catches up.
Yeah, you're good.
What I was going to mention is just that it seems like there's a lot of movement in college football of changes that are being made, changes at the top when it comes to the playoff. And, you know, one might argue that baseball has recently been through some of these. The most changes they've had in the past 100 years have happened in the past, 2 years. And for college football, it feels the same way. And I would add and probably argue that all the changes in baseball, for the most part, 95% of them have been positive, even if we wouldn't have trusted it at the time. So what I want to just put before you guys is that in the midst of some things changing to college football, that, you can be optimistic and say they're all going to end up positive and positive for the game. I think there's something that's getting left behind, which could really use some improvement. And it's just the current bowl situation, where you've got these Sun Belt teams, these MAC teams, the American Conference, and truly there's just not much of a reason for you to want to sit down and watch these football games. And I don't know if there ever was, but I just feel like less and less so do I want to sit down to watch these. So recently, let's just backtrack and let me kind of prime you guys for this. Recently, they came out and said that redshirt freshmen we're going to be able to play in these games and not lose their red shirt, which I think is a great idea. And I think that these guys that have early enrolled are able to go to bowl practices, able to be on the sidelines. So some of the younger players are able to participate in these. But let me put this in front of you guys. If you were I think this is part of the problem is who's in charge of college football. There's several answers that would probably be appropriate. But let's say that you're at the top of that mountain and you were able to make just a couple of adjustments to the college football or to the bowl system right now. What are a couple of changes that you would make, Graham, and I'm going to start with you, that you think would positively impact these bowl games, the bowl matchups, the lead up, and then ultimately just where you would actually want, maybe be more likely to sit down and want to watch these games?
Yeah, I think it has to start with the people that play in the games. And I would also include the coaches in that. I think that heard a quote from Chip Kelly that it was like, there's complete free agency during like the biggest part of our season in college football is the bowl season. And so you're allowing coaches to leave. So there's interim coaches. You're allowing players to leave and enter the transfer portal or to sit out, whether that be because they're transferring or because they're declaring for the NFL draft. But to me, there has to be an incentive, or at least maybe a punishment for coaches or players that sit out, for example. Like maybe you can't go anything crazy, but maybe if you don't play in the bowl game and you were the SEC champion, you don't get a ring. Okay, you have to play the full season in order to actually qualify that on your resume, which it's not a whole lot, but to me, I think the biggest part is not the players sitting out, but it's the coaches. Coaches leaving, go to one place to another. It's like, okay, well now you have not only one school that's in shambles, you have two schools that have interim coaches and are calling up analysts to be on the sideline, and it's just complete chaos. So I think ultimately the schedule has to change. Maybe the transfer portal doesn't need to open until after, you can't enter the transfer portal until after your team has played in their bowl game or something like that. That way you're finishing out the season, and then whatever's done is done.
Yeah, I think that's really solid, Graham. I think that you're hitting on a very macro level change that I think everyone in every position of college football would say we've got a problem when it comes to just the timeline of the college football season, which I think is just
the calendar.
Again, we see it just popping up here again of, hey, it would solve this problem too if we could figure out what makes the most sense. And Hampton, before I go to you, I want to just offer that I think one thing that's made these bowl games really hard to watch. I watched the Troy game, heavily penalized. I feel like the referees took that game I felt like it was on the pace to be a really good football game, and these referees just it felt like they took away each big play, and it wasn't the egregious, it was the ticky-tacky stuff that they were willing to penalize. So maybe if there's just, I hate to blame it on the officiating, but it felt like that game would have been kind of a shootout, and the referees made it where it wasn't so. And then last night when I was watching the UNLV, and help me out, who were they playing? Who's that?
I'm not sure.
Kansas,
that's right, Kansas. And it felt like every time somebody scored, there was a flag on the flag on the play. So I don't know. It's like you want the guys to get excited and get hyped because there's so many games where they're not. But at the same time, it just feels like there's always this there's not many people in the crowd. There's flags all over the place. It just made it hard to watch. So Hampton, how would you, just maybe one or two changes from the top that you could make that would hopefully make these bowl games a little bit more intriguing?
I think I've got another additional point than what Graham said, but I do want to tack onto that because I think he hit a core problem that I don't know who is going to solve because, like you said earlier, who's running college football right now? There's no college football commissioner. The NCAA has been rendered useless, but the college football calendar has to change. Not only with the transfer portal, but with recruiting in general. I mean, right now, like Chip Kelly said, with Alabama, it is their busiest time of year. You're preparing for a semifinal game, but also on top of that, you're trying to finish signing your recruiting class for the most part because early signing day has become national signing day. The one in February is pretty much out of I don't know what the word is. It doesn't have the allure that it once did. It doesn't have the spotlight that it once did. So now when you're preparing for a semifinal game, you're worried about getting recruits from high school, but you're also worried about players from your current team leaving and entering the transfer portal. I mean, Alabama had Ja'Cory Brooks leave, and the season's not over yet. Texas had Malik Murphy leave, and he even said that he didn't want to leave, but due to the way the portal window was, he had to leave at that time because I think that he would have been penalized if not. That should not be the case. Players should be able to finish with their program and with their team if they would like to and had the opportunity to choose if they would like to do that or not. Coaches that leave for other jobs, I am one of those people who I think just like there have been a lot of assistants under Nick Saban that have gotten other jobs and they continue coaching and they continue doing the job they currently have while also working on the job that they're leaving for. I think that should be more of a model because to me, you start the season with these group of kids, you owe it to them to finish it and not just leave in the middle of the night and say, thank you for everything you did for helping me get another job, but peace out, I'm gone. And you're going to have an interim coach for the final month of the year. I don't like that, and I think that's something that, again, the college football calendar really encourages coaches who get new jobs to leave, because they have to hurry and scramble and get a recruiting class in order and have to devote their time and their resources toward that new job. So I'm with you. I think transfer portal doesn't need to open until after the college football championship. Make it so that coaches can really squarely focus on the game itself and their bowl game. And while bowl games have been rendered meaningless and useless, it's because of these opt-outs. I mean, Florida State, I don't know anybody in their starting 22, the 11 on offense, 11 on defense. The names that you grew attached to throughout the year, they're no longer there. They've opted out. They're going to the draft or they're transferring. And my thing, I think what would really solve that, because again, I'm about commitment and about finishing what you've started. Why not? And I'm going to give my good friend Thomas Watts credit on this, because I think this is a really smart idea. Attach a contingency to their NIL payout, that you will not receive your NIL money from the university unless you play in the bowl game. And that to really incentivize them to finish the season and finish what they started. Again, I don't know the legality behind that. I don't know if that would even work. But kind of like what Graham mentioned, you have to do something to keep these players on board, because unfortunately in today's society, it's all about what's best for me, what's best for my career and my future, instead of what's best for the team and finishing out something that you've committed to. Because one thing I will say, and the last thing I'll say before I kick to you, Chase, one of my prouder moments as an Alabama fan was last year. Alabama plays in the Sugar Bowl. The number 1 and the number 3 pick in the draft, they could have easily sat out. They could have easily been like, thank you, we're not playing in this bowl game because it's not for a national championship. But they knew that they owed it to their brothers and that it meant something to wear that Alabama A across their chest. And they finished what they started. And I think not every program is like that. But if you get players to stop opting out of the games, the bowls will become less meaningless, because it used to mean everything to a team to make a bowl game. But now it's, if we don't make the college football national championship, our season is a bust. And that shouldn't be the case. Bowl games need to become more prominent again. But unfortunately, with the direction we're heading down, I don't see how we can kind of reverse that course at this juncture.
As you were sitting here talking about this, I actually think I had an idea that came with, you say it was Watts who said tie their NIL money to them playing in the bowl game. Is that who?
Yeah.
Tim Watts.
Thomas.
I was sitting here, Thomas. I was sitting here thinking, I really don't know another way to get around it other than you probably need to delete half of them. And I know that that's kind of the no-duh solution, but if you were to do that, I think that would solve some of these problems. But I'm sitting here thinking, I was watching the Gasparillo Bowl, and I'm like, I don't even know what Gasparillo does to make money. You know what I'm saying? The Guaranteed Rate Bowl. Well, I think at some level it would be cool to see, if NIL is a part of our new structure, if some of these bowl games had financial ties to, hey, if you want a good bowl game, if you want, these bowl games to make something, then you need to tie some kind of NIL money into it. It's like, hey, the reason you should play is because we want to pay you $20,000, per player to play in this game. Now, do you think that Bryce Young or Will Anderson needs $20,000? Well, the guy who's sitting there thinking about, should I go to the NFL? There's going to be someone that is the tipping point. And I think that if these bowl games want to continue to have an existence, either you're going to be a part of a bowl game who's, all these big insurance companies that have, so much money. Well, start putting your money where your mouth is and start paying these players to play in your bowl game. And then if you're one of these lower level bowl games, who doesn't have the money to pay, well, that's fine. Well, don't expect these guys to opt in. But I think that there would be some kind of financial incentive directly to the player, which I think would actually probably solve a good portion of this. They get gifts, but man, like make it worth their time and make it worth it. Man, I want to get to a good bowl game and shoot. Even if we didn't make it to the one where I got $60,000, shoot, if I got these numbers might be outrageous, but at the same time, somebody's making a lot of money to put these games online and put these games on TV, the TV contracts. You've got so many people making money. It would be interesting to see a format where the players got paid to play in these games. And I think that then you would see the game start to mean something. And maybe even like, hey, winner got, X and then loser got Y. That would be something I'd be willing to tune in to watch. So, anyways, I just kind of had that idea. I think that would be good. The one comment that I had about you guys suggesting moving the portal, the only problem that I'm running into in my head, and if you guys have a quick response, I think that's fine. I think I'm really just raising another issue that makes this difficult, is that if there's going to be a transfer window in between kind of the season coming to a close, it probably needs to begin and end, or give them some window before classes start for the spring. And that's why I'm lying on it. It does have to be, even if you wanted to say, hey, it's after New Year's, well, maybe it's in between the first playoff game and the second one. I think that then you only have 2 teams that it impacts. I think I'm okay with that. But something like that, I think, might be the bread and butter or the sweet spot. But anyways, that's just kind of what I'm kind of another issue that I'm raising. Hampton, any maybe initial reactions to, is that just a valid point or something you would say that maybe solve that?
I think it's a valid point for sure. And I think it's going to become even more difficult with now the 12-team playoff is going to be coming in next year, which is going to push the national championship game back a couple more weeks, which means classes will already be in session for a couple weeks. And so logistically, that is going to be even more of a problem. So I don't know how you get around that. I'm sure we could have a really long discussion going through the ins and outs of that, but we probably won't do that today. But I think that's a great question that you posed, and probably why it is the way it is. But I think we could, if we put our heads together for a long period of time, we could come up with a better solution than what is currently a disaster, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and I think that you have to quickly answer, just not you, but do we have 2 I guess periods that guys can transfer? Is it kind of this window and then after spring?
Spring, yep.
Okay. Yeah, man, we've got ourselves in a pickle, and I don't know if I know the right answer for it, but Grant, let's move on to you.
Yeah, quickly, I'll just talk about the portal king himself, Lane Kiffin. I mean, what Ole Miss has done in the portal this year has been nothing short of absolutely incredible. You've got Walter Nolan. You've got Juice Wells from South Carolina, who's a really, really good player. You got that Prince guy from Florida. Got a linebacker from Arkansas. There are a few other people that they're after. Evan Stewart, in particular, apparently is on Ole Miss's list. I mean, they are absolutely reshaping and overhauling a lot of their roster to complement Jackson Dart, Judkins, and Trey Harris coming back. They're going to be a handful next year in the SEC. I think they're going to have a really, really good year. I mean, they went 10-2 this year, and I think they've only gotten better in this offseason, and they're not done yet. And then a sneaky portal addition that I really liked. I like the fit, and I like the quarterback. Riley Leonard going to Notre Dame, I think, is going to be a fun marriage in a lot of ways. I kind of like seeing him on a bigger stage, and I'm interested to kind of see how they utilize him and how he plays with better talent around him than he did at Duke. So that was another one that I really, really liked the fit for both the player and the university.
Yeah, I like that. Go ahead, Graham.
Yeah. I like it, Graham. Thanks for adding that.
And I want to throw one more team in the mix. I think a team that just continues to reload. I'll throw in two just notable mentions. Is Oregon seems to continue to kind of cherry pick. Or never in a place where they're in desperate need, but always in a place where they're able to take. That's
Mm-hmm.
that's just a good a good program that's in that position. And then Missouri seems to be the same. They're building something special. Always
Yes.
in a position where they're willing to take better talent, but not in desperate need. So worth
They've
mentioning.
recruited. They had a really good recruiting class this
Yeah, they
past
did.
cycle too.
Mm-hmm. That they're definitely on the front edge of this new NIL world, even to high school players. Really interesting to
Yep.
see that Missouri's leading the legislation when it comes to NIL money for high schoolers.
Yeah.
But all right, let's move on to our last topic, which is why most people might be tuning in to talk about the playoff. And so let's start with
Playoffs.
let's start with the middle matchup. Let's start with Texas and Washington. Hampton, give me your 2 cents.
I agree with a lot of what Graham said. I think this is a very compelling matchup. I think people are sleeping on it to some extent, and kind of, I think a lot of people expect Texas to kind of run away with it. And I'm with you, Graham. I think it's going to be a very close game because it's going to be interesting to see if Washington can hold up against Texas front seven that features Tavondre Sweat, Byron Murphy on the line. Both of those guys are really, really good players. They've got a couple other D linemen that are great in the run game, but they're also really good pass rushers. I don't think they have a dominant like Dallas Turner or Chris Braswell type, but honestly, interior pressure for a quarterback is often worse than pressure that comes from the tackles because you can kind of do a little bit more to evade that. If someone's coming right at you, right in your face, it's more difficult to evade. And not only do they have them, they have Anthony Hill, the freshman linebacker, who is an absolute freakazoid. Probably, if which Caleb Downs to me is the best freshman in the country, he's probably number two. He's been absolutely outstanding this year. But like Graham mentioned, the weakness of Texas is that secondary. And I think the compelling matchup to watch and something that I don't think we should lose sight of in every game almost, it comes down to trench play. If Washington can hold up against Texas and give Penix enough time to throw, to read the defense, and deliver the ball accurately down the field, Texas could be in for one because I think they can exploit that secondary with Rome Dunze, Polk, and a few other receivers that they have. And then you add in the dimension of Dylan Johnson, their running back, who's been playing really well as of late, was huge in the Pac-12 championship game. They've got Troy Fontenot at tackle, who's probably going to be a first-round pick. And the surprising thing about that Pac-12 championship, and we talked about on the show, was how physical Washington was. Like, I think we all went into the game thinking Oregon was going to kind of bully them around. And I would say Washington did to Oregon what we thought Oregon would do to Washington. And Texas is a different beast. I totally get that. But to me, that is what the game comes down to. I think if you look at the Texas offense versus the Washington defense, I think Texas will definitely have success on that Washington defense. I don't think they're an elite unit by any stretch of the imagination. They do have a really good corner, and his name escapes me, but in every game I watch, he plays with a lot of swag. He's really sticky in coverage, makes very good at catch point, making plays on the ball. And if I had to guess, they probably would line him up on Xavier Worthy and try to take him out of the game. But the problem with that is Texas has A.D. Mitchell. They have Noah Whittington, Jatavian Sanders at tight end. And while they lost Jonathan Brooks for the year, they have Reuben Owens at running back, who has been really, really good for them. And I'm going to fact check myself here in a minute to make sure I got that name right because I think Reuben Owens is the one. There's one at A&M and there's one at Texas, and I'm right. It's Cedric Baxter is the one at Texas. A&M is Reuben Owens. So they've got Cedric Baxter, who has really stepped in as a true freshman and kind of filled the absence of Jonathan Brooks. So this is going to be a fun matchup. It's going to be a fun nightcap to New Year's. But ultimately, in the end, I think Texas, because of their front seven, is going to be able to affect the passing game of Washington just enough to get the win and go on and play in Houston for the national championship game.
Yeah, I like it. Good recap, guys. If I had to kind of put it in my own words, I feel like Texas is going to try to shoot threes, and I feel like Washington's probably a little bit more of that. Gonna kind of be a little bit more of a straight up team, not as streaky. But I say that more thinking, man, when Ewers and Sarkisian and Worthy, like when they're all playing together, man, it's
When
like a
they're
team
humming.
that's shooting threes, and it's just like, how do you beat them? But by the same token, there can be a whole quarter where it's just like 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out, because they just can't seem to get it
And
going.
that's what makes them such an enigma to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like when they played, especially in the fourth quarter, when they played Alabama, Quinn Ewers was on, especially throwing the ball vertically down the field. But for the majority of the time, that's not how he plays. Like he can be very sporadic. I know he played well against Oklahoma State, but I could have played well against them as wide open as their receivers were, because Oklahoma State's secondary was ravaged by injuries and they were playing freshmen everywhere.
Playing in
But
water.
it'll be, huh?
I said they were also playing in water is what it looked like.
They they were playing with center blocks on their feet.
Oh, God.
So it is kind of like you don't know exactly what version of Texas will show up, but if they're humming and it's like a beautiful symphony, sorry Huskies, you're going to have to go back in the cold because it's going to be a long night for you.
You better just hope they don't come out like whenever Baylor won the national championship and just from the go, never a doubt about it,
Yeah.
hitting threes and it just like that. That's how Washington dies quickly. And
Yes.
I think if they're going to win, their path of victory is just they can't go down 14-3 and look up at the end of the first quarter. It's got to be one of those where it's like, hey, they
You
kick
got to
a
take
field goal.
control early. I agree.
Yeah. So, well, hey, let's move on
Apply
to
some game pressure.
Let's move on to our 1 versus 4 matchup, which is Michigan versus Alabama. Guys, I've still said, man, if I could have had for Christmas some tickets to this game, I think there's just something that's, something about going to the Rose Bowl that I think would just be memorable. And a team that's been as successful as Alabama has only played in it, since the beginning of the Saban era is where they played the national championship, was at the Rose Bowl. It's taken them this long to play there again, just to kind of highlight how unique this going to this venue is. So let's get there. And Hampton, I'll start with you and give me your thoughts on this matchup.
So fun fact, and I'll have to give credit to Locked On Bama for this one. This is actually the second time that Alabama has played in the Rose Bowl since Saban has become the head coach, but the second time they played in Dallas at Jerry's World, because it was a playoff semifinal game, but that was with COVID and California had all those restrictions. So technically this should be the third time that Alabama plays in the Rose Bowl. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But you're right, it is not a venue that Alabama gets to play at often. But there's something magical about it, man. Like the pageantry, the tradition there, where the setting of like the mountains around you, and it's just
the team photo is
it's
just
special.
Yeah, you want to just put the team photo up on your wall, just because that's how beautiful it is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's going to be fun to see Alabama face off with another traditional blue blood in a game of this magnitude. And Alabama, I think all time is 5-1-1 in the Rose Bowl. So they've had a lot of success there. And I think this game is compelling on many different fronts. I already mentioned two traditional blue bloods going at it. But when you look at the game from personnel and schematic standpoint, there's a lot to really dig into. And I'll start with Alabama offense versus Michigan defense. Michigan's defense has been really, really good all year. They've been stout. I don't think they've allowed over 30 points this year, or if they have, it was to Ohio State, and it might have been like 31. But I don't even think Ohio State got to 30 in that game. So they've been a really stout unit. I don't think they're overly explosive from a pass rush perspective. Like they get pressure on the quarterback, but they don't have, again, like a Dallas Turner, a Chris Braswell, a guy that you can say he's like a $100 million man like in the NFL. They're kind of a unit that gets pressure, but they don't get a lot of sacks from what I've seen. They've got a really good corner. I believe his name is Will Johnson. He's the guy that kind of shadowed Marvin Harrison in when they played late in November, and he did actually a very admirable job. And I think he's going to kind of welcome the challenge of trying to shut down a guy like Jermaine Burton and a guy like Isaiah Bond. But I also think maybe this isn't a blueprint because they're two totally different offenses, two different quarterbacks. But Maryland really had a lot of success on Michigan throwing the ball down the field. And they had guys open in that game. And I think Talia Tungavailoa had some throws that he probably wish he had back. I mean, there were opportunities down the field, and that's kind of, I mean, we've watched Jalen Milroe all year, and there's been a lot of progression in his game. But one thing that he's had since the beginning is that dang deep ball. And I think that Alabama is going to have opportunities in that game to really throw the ball vertically down the field and really challenge those Michigan DBs because I don't think what Alabama wants to get in the rut or get caught in the trap of trying to, we're going to show you like that we're the biggest, baddest, most physical team. And what I mean by that is Alabama should still prioritize running the ball 100% for sure. But they need to be a little more nuanced and a little bit more multifaceted in their approach. And so what I mean by that is taking deep shots, incorporating the QB run game that we've seen more and more of as the year is going on, design touches for Kendrick Law, more usage of the tight ends, because I think they can have a lot of success throwing the ball up the seam and catching mismatches with Amari Niblack and CJ Dupree. And then when you do want to get really physical with Michigan, because, I mean, we talked about it on here, one of the biggest takeaways from that Georgia game was how Alabama's offensive line manhandled Georgia in a lot of ways. I mean, they were reestablishing the line of scrimmage 2 or 3 yards down the field, and that was really the difference in the game. And I think Michigan is very comparable to Georgia in the trenches, so I think that they can still have success running the ball, but I don't think they need to get caught in that trap of a 3-yard and cloud of dust offense, which I don't think they will. But they need to sprinkle in all these different elements to really give Michigan a lot that they have to think about and a lot that they have to defend. Make them defend every blade of every blade of grass. And I think they can have a lot of success because when they played Ohio State, Ohio State has great athletes, very comparable to Alabama, but they haven't played a quarterback like Jalen Milroe all year. And I think that is an X factor in this game to watch. When we go to the Michigan offense versus the Alabama defense, Michigan is a very run-oriented team. They lean on Blake Corum. They lean on Donovan Edwards, but to a lesser extent, really, than they did last year. I think when I checked earlier, he only had like 300 to 400 yards rushing, where Corum is kind of their workhorse. He has over 20 touchdowns this year. That is what they like to do. Down the stretch in the year, I mean, they ran the ball 31 straight times against Penn State, and they want to win the game by controlling the line of scrimmage and being the more physical team. Well, thankfully, Alabama is really, really good at defending the run, and they run a lot of power, and I'm sure that they'll sprinkle in more QB run stuff with J.J. McCarthy because I think toward the latter half of the year, he was hampered a little bit by an injury, which I think affected that aspect of their offense, but also limited their passing attack to an extent. This is not a team that can't throw the ball. I think, Chase, we were talking pre-show, they were a team that they could get away with running it a lot against some of the teams that they were playing toward the latter half of the year. And they've got Roman Wilson at receiver, who's their number one guy, who can be a deep threat for them. And J.J. McCarthy can be really accurate with the football, and he can be dangerous with his legs. But I think the X factor for Alabama on defense isn't anything really schematically. I think it's health. This is going to be the healthiest Alabama defense in quite a while. Deontay Lawson, I think, is going to be as close to 100% as he has been since September. Same could be said for Jaheim Otis, Malachi Moore, Jalen Key, a couple really key contributors along that defense that I think are going to be just flying around and, ready to go. I think they've been a very banged up unit for the past, I'd say 5 to 6 weeks, which I know every team around the country is, but those guys were really banged up. Deontay Lawson and Jalen Key in that game against Auburn looked like they shouldn't have even been out there. They were playing that hurt. So I think Alabama's really well equipped to defend what Michigan has to offer on offense. And I think Michigan's a really good team, but I don't believe they played anybody to the caliber of Alabama. I don't think they played the athletes that Alabama has to offer and has at their disposal. So I'm picking Alabama to win. I'd say by about 10 to 14 points. I think they match up well, and they're going to win this game and then hopefully have their eyes set on a Texas rematch in Houston. So give me Alabama. I don't think this game will be a blowout, but I just think Alabama has too many dudes and too many matchups to exploit.
Yeah, I think for Michigan it comes down to are they gonna coach scared, or are they really gonna try to go out there and take it? And so we'll just have to see. Graham, thanks. I didn't grab you guys' prediction. So just to recap, we've got Graham saying that Washington's going to play Alabama, and Hampton's got Texas playing Alabama in the national championship in Houston. So let me just give you my quick take on the Michigan-Alabama matchup, and then I'll get us out of here. And I really want to overreact and say that I don't think that the Michigan team this year is better than the one last year. And I'd go as far to say that I don't think Ohio State's I think they're both they're not as good this year as they probably were last year. And we're using kind of some circular logic of, well, why is Michigan good? Well, they beat Ohio State. And I'm saying I don't think either one of those teams are as good as they probably were last year. If you're looking for playmakers, Aiden Hutchinson no longer on Michigan. Wasn't he last draft cycle, or am I getting confused? He was 2 years ago?
He was 2021.
Okay, apologize for that. But just that this is the same team that went and played TCU, who we realize was not a very good football team, top down.
No.
And they got beat by them. No way around it. And I just don't think they've got the dudes. I think that they play a pretty weak schedule. And I think when you look at if you just look at just draft, how many guys on Michigan are supposed to get drafted day one? And right now they have no guys projected to be drafted day one. And maybe somebody climbs into there, but I think that Alabama has around 4 to 5 is what they're projecting. And I think just simply they don't have the Jimmies and Joes that Alabama does, really, that any of these teams do. And I really don't know what do you make of this? What does Michigan do going forward if they lose? It's just been proven that you can get there being a part of a conference that's very top heavy. You've beat Ohio State, which is great, but you're only getting one out of your 3 maybe major goals for the season. And so I'm not sure what they're going to do to get over that hump, but I think you continue to see that the SEC is out recruiting them. And I think it's just the end of the day, I don't think that this team is better than the one last year. And the one last year got beat by TCU. And I think that it'll be respectable. I don't think they get blown out, but I just don't think that they have the dudes per se. So, Hampton, give us our last thought, and then I'll get us out of here.
3 quick things. Sound like a preacher. Yeah. Get ready, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. I think the point you said about their schedule is spot on. They only played Penn State and Ohio State. Penn State's quarterback, Drew Aller, was one of the worst quarterbacks I've seen all year in big games, both against Ohio State and Michigan. He was awful. He couldn't hit simple throws, and, basically they were playing a run-oriented team, and I think Penn State is going to get shellacked by Ole Miss, to be honest, this weekend, which, again, bowl game, you can't really count it, but I think that's worth mentioning. And also, they struggle with an Ohio State team led by Honda Accord, who we can all agree, not a very good quarterback. I think Ryan Day would agree since he sent him packing to Syracuse,
Mhm.
and he's no longer there. The other thing, one thing Michigan does have going for it is they're very experienced.
Mhm.
They've been to the playoff twice. J.J. McCarthy has played in the playoff twice. I know it was more limited that first year, but they've been through a lot together. In the big games, that type of stuff matters. But again, you're going against Alabama, who is a program notorious for playing in big games. And before we get out of here, Chase, what is your prediction? Who do you have winning both semifinal games and going to the national championship?
Yeah, I think I land in the Alabama Texas camp, and I think it's more so just because I think I'd love to see that rematch. And
It'd be great.
yeah, I mean,
It
I
would be
think it is just
fantastic.
that UT does have a little bit of this. They like to shoot threes, and so I'd love to see them make threes that first game, and just like it would be so much fun to talk about going into
It would.
second year. And here, I'll make a wild prediction. How awesome would it be if Alabama versus Texas, right where it all started, Saban beats them in Houston, and then I think he retires. Like I don't think that's wild to say that. I think that if he wins the national championship, I think that he would be okay hanging it up, and I think it'd make it that much sweeter that it was right where they started, which was against Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So that might not have been what you were asking for, but I'll definitely I'll add that on top because I
Awesome.
think he's got to retire at some point, and I think after last year I was thinking, man, I don't know if Saban's going to get one. Like get to retire out on one.
Be of little faith.
Little faith. And anyways, I think that it'd be cool to see him do it this year. So, well, hey, if you've made it this far, you're a true fan and grateful that you listen to our podcast. Just here to talk about college football. So thanks for making time. Hope that you've had a Merry Christmas. And we'll be back with some reaction, I'm sure, to the first semifinal matchup that's going to be this Saturday. And we'll have plenty to talk about. So, isn't that right?
They're both on Monday,
Monday.
January 1st.
Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit too excited.
You're excited. I feel you, brother. You're good.
So, yeah, they'll play on Monday. We'll probably react on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday and put out an episode. So, a lot to look forward to. So, we've given you plenty to chew on. As the Pigskin Cafe is going to be closed for now, but until then, chew on this. See you guys later.